Gregg Jarrett, Fox News legal analyst, also author of the #1 bestseller, The Russia Hoax. Harry Severino is with us, Chief Counsel, Policy Director, Judicial Crisis Network. Greg, your thoughts?
Well, you were the very first person within a couple of hours of the Avenatti story breaking that said, you said this very clearly and repeatedly, he deserves the presumption of innocence and due process. And you're to be commended for that. And I think you really led the way for a lot of people. The irony, of course, as you point out, is that Avenatti wanted to deprive Kavanaugh of those basic, fundamental, and important American principles of justice. Now he wants to enjoy those presumptions of innocence and due process himself. So the irony is lost on no one. You know, it's anybody can make an accusation, but we have a process in America in which proof is required. But, you know, Avenatti wanted to essentially ruin the life and career, fine reputation of Brett Kavanaugh without presentation of proof, because he submitted an affidavit that we now know was faulty. It was, in some parts, disavowed by his client, Julie Swetnick, when she gave an interview. So it's correct that the Department of Justice should be investigating Avenatti and Swetnick as to whether or not they presented false material, false and misleading statements to Congress, which is, by the way, a very serious crime. You know, so I stand by your original statement that Avenatti is innocent until proven guilty.
Carrie, many of the people that came out immediately and said, I believe, whether it was Swetnick or whether it was Professor Ford, et cetera, this was before Professor Ford was known to anybody. He had never said a word to anybody. It was only a letter that had been sent to Dianne Feinstein through another, I believe, state legislator at the time. All of those people that said, I believe, not one have I heard say a single word about whether we should believe the woman that's making the allegations against Michael Avenatti. Is it because it's not important to them? Is it because the issue's not important to them? Is it because there's no politics in play? It was just like all the allegations that existed. And again, these are recent allegations. These aren't 36 years old, or the allegations against Keith Ellison, or many on those on that Senate committee, the Senate Judiciary Committee, that love the Clintons and ignore all the issues with Bill Clinton and Juanita and Kathleen and Paula, etc. It's interesting, isn't it? Which people they choose to believe, and then they just are silent on others.
Absolutely. I mean, the silence is deafening. And I think it's exactly right. These are the same people who lined up to defend Bill Clinton, even in the face of proven misconduct. And, you know, here they're not willing to stand by the faulty anti-due process principles they wanted to put on their political enemies. They don't want to apply to everyone. What we need here is exactly, as we've been talking about, a rule of law that applies to everyone. That means innocent until proven guilty, whether I like your politics or dislike them, whether it's going to help or hurt my personal interests. We have to make sure we're being fair to all parties. And like you, I don't know what the truth is in this. I hope that we find out the truth, but we can't jump to the conclusions based on whether we like the person accused or think it would be politically convenient for that person to be found guilty or thought guilty. Because people kept on saying, well, this isn't a court of law. This is just the court of public opinion. That doesn't change things. Our American system is one where there's a fundamental value of understanding that innocence until proven guilty. And that means, you know, when you're in a courtroom, but also in terms of how we speak in the court of public opinion. So I think it's great that we're able to talk about this and say, let's reserve judgment and hopefully maybe set an example. I'm hoping that some people on the left, seeing this contrast, I mean, I was struck when you were reading it, hearing his words of, well, I've never done this and I never would. I spent my career advocating for the rights of women. That's almost word for word what Brett Kavanaugh said.
Yeah,
so
but let me make a prediction. I'm telling you right now.
If you believe it here, believe it then.
And I guess he's upset. I guess the RNC has asked for the arrest records in this particular case, and he claims he's innocent. I'll even take it a step further, Greg. I hope no man would ever do this to any woman ever. I would hope that would be the case, regardless of one's politics, but I can make a prediction, and I know with 100% certainty I'm right. If the Democrats need to do this politically again, the ones that won't say anything now or didn't say anything about Clinton or Ellison, they'll be right back to where they were. It's happened. Look at the slander of Kennedy against Robert Bork. Look at what Clarence Thomas went through. Real quick, Greg.
Well, let me just say a couple of things. As a California lawyer who grew up in Los Angeles and practiced there, I can affirm that they don't make an arrest and book somebody on a felony charge without probable cause, which means at least the detectives who made the arrest and booked him on that felony charge felt that there was evidence of, under the statute, significant visible injuries.
Let me get to that when we get back, because there was one line in the TMZ report that if it turns out to be true, I think would be devastating to his case. We'll continue. Gregg Jarrett, Carrie Severino is with us. All right, as we continue with Gregg Jarrett and Carrie Severino talking about Avenatti, the double standard, why only believe if it's a charge against a Republican or judge, but not a Democrat. There's one line in TMZ that, if it turned out to be true, Greg, legally, well, she hit me first. That, to me, would be devastatingly hard to defend in court, wouldn't it, if that, in fact, is true?
It would. On the one hand, it's a self-serving statement by the accused that he's defending himself, but on the other hand, it's an admission, a confession that he hit her second. It's one thing to defend yourself against an individual, especially a woman who's hitting you, and you might grab her arms or wrists and so forth, but these were reportedly injuries to the face of the alleged victim. And so that will be a damning admission if, in fact, it's true that he hit her in the face.
And at some point, Carrie, I would assume, I guess others have applied for this as well on the media, but people are wanting the arrest records. I assume with that might be some, if there's any physical evidence, that might be released, or mugshots. I don't know what they're looking for.
It definitely a possibility that stuff's going to come out. She hit me first is something I heard yesterday from my 5-year-old. So I'm hoping that that doesn't turn out to be an accurate excuse, because it just didn't work with me as a mom, and I don't think it would work in court. But I think there's just so much more. There's a lot more research that needs to be done before we can come to any conclusions on this. Is the challenge.
With no corroborating evidence and obviously a lot of politics, for the rest of his life, his wife's life, and his kids' lives, sadly, these charges against Justice Kavanaugh are out there, and what he went through. And that's the danger of somebody, if they make an allegation and it's false or unprovable or no evidence whatsoever, people rush to judgment just because of maybe the noise that they hear on it, and they don't have any objectivity. The principles of due process, presumption of innocence are key. All right, thank you both. Carrie, thank you. Greg, always great to have you, my friend.